Recently, we've seen several high-profile COVID-19 clinical trials hit the pause button. What exactly does that mean, and is that something we should be concerned about on this episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog? Welcome to Shareable Science. Science you can share. Over the last several weeks, we've seen 3 phase 3 clinical trials go on voluntary pause. September 6th, AstraZeneca paused their COVID vaccine trial. On October 12th, Johnson & Johnson paused their vaccine trial. And the next day, the NIH, in conjunction with Eli Lilly, paused their phase 3 clinical trial of a monoclonal antibody. Now, that's one of several arms of that monoclonal antibody trial. The whole trial wasn't stopped. So what does this mean when clinical trials go on a safety pause? Well, it means that they've identified what's called a serious adverse event, an SAE. And that's an unexplained or unexpected symptom or illness. That's more than I had redness or itching at the injection site if the vaccine was given by shot. It's something more serious, an unexpected set of symptoms, a disorder, something that might land me in the hospital. Serious adverse events are something that you try to avoid. That's why we go through phased clinical trials where we start with a small number of people to look at safety and then a larger number before we progress to phase 3 trials. But we should also remember that when you're talking about a phase 3 clinical trial with tens of thousands of individuals, just by chance, it's likely that you're going to have individuals that are going to get sick. Maybe they have a heart attack or they have a stroke or they develop cancer. And they would have done that anyway, potentially. The question is, let's pause. Let's look at the clinical information. What does that tell us? And then let's make decisions about if that needs to actually change the progress of the rest of the clinical trial. So this is generally managed and reviewed by an independent data safety monitoring board. So these are independent groups that are set up by each clinical trial. So right now, there are 3 data safety monitoring boards that are each looking at each one looking at a different one of these paused trials. And they'll dig through the clinical data and they'll talk to investigators and then they'll make a decision, a recommendation about if the trial goes forward, if the trial needs to be modified, or if the trial is halted. Now, there are some key questions that these data safety monitoring boards are asking themselves. And they include these. So, what is the adverse event? How serious is this? Does this involve the neurological system? Does this involve the immune system? We know that for the AstraZeneca clinical trial, 2 individuals experienced some sort of neurological disorder. We don't have a whole lot of details, and that's not surprising because we're also protecting the privacy of the volunteers in the clinical trials. We don't know much at all about the adverse event for the Johnson & Johnson or the Eli Lilly trials. Did the individual receive the drug or the vaccine, or did they receive a placebo? You would expect that if they received the placebo, so let's say saline solution, then that would make it even less likely that their unexplained symptoms are due to the medication because they didn't even receive the medication. We know for the AstraZeneca case that 2 individuals with the neurological symptoms did receive the drug. We don't have that information about Johnson & Johnson or the Eli Lilly study. Could these symptoms be related to the way the drug or the vaccine works? That really is a key component here. If we understand their symptoms, is there a possibility that the biology of how the drug or the vaccine works could be related to this? And that's something that they're going to pay especially close attention to. And then, was this a voluntary pause or was this a regulatory hold? So did the study sponsor look at the data, look at some of the safety data and say, we need to pause and dig into this more deeply, or was this required by the regulatory body? These were voluntary pauses in all 3 cases. AstraZeneca's was done in coordination with the regulatory bodies of all the different countries where they're running their clinical trial. And the AstraZeneca trial has been allowed to continue in other countries by their regulatory bodies. In the United States, the FDA has still kept American volunteers on hold for that part of their trial. And then does this actually change the parameters of the trial going forward? So once they determine their findings, they may make a recommendation that everything continues as is, or they may suggest a slightly different dosage, or that a certain population of individuals be excluded or pre-tested for pre-existing conditions ahead of time. You'll see that there is a question that is not listed here, and that's, should you and I be worried about these pauses? And we shouldn't. Clinical pauses, safety pauses, happen all the time in large-stage clinical trials. We just don't hear about them. We're looking at them right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we have everything under a microscope. But this is a part of the process. In addition to being effective, these kinds of therapeutics and vaccines have to be incredibly safe. And so these pauses tell us that the safety mechanisms put in place by the monitoring boards are working. And they reassure us that safety is a prime concern of the groups that are doing these clinical trials. On the flip side, it's also important for us to recognize that these are all new medications. And this is the first time we're seeing what happens when large numbers of people are being given the medication. It's what you want before you give hundreds of millions of people a vaccine or a therapeutic. But it also reminds us that while the science is good, it's not bulletproof. And we should expect that at some point in this process, we're going to find something that either makes a medication less likely to be useful or intolerable, or we're going to have to change the way we think about this. So it's a normal part of the process. So don't worry, keep watching, and have patience. And I know patience is something that is in short supply right now, but we have to let the science go where it's going to. We have to follow the data. I hope you found this useful. If you know other people that might be interested in what happens when a clinical trial pauses and what does that mean for our safety, please share this video with them. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. Thanks, and take care.